Hello everyone. As you know, Carry Work 080 is incoming soon, and WarGaming has released another Waterline episode, this time detailing the Carrier rework. I have not seen it yet, but I am very eager to find out what they talk about. So I thought it'd be fun, without having seen it yet, to watch it with you and do a mild sort of, I don't know, gasp reaction phase. Anyway, shall we just get started?
Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is a special Waterline episode with me, Saboctavian, and today we have a special guest. Our executive producer, Arthur, nickname?
Evan. Okay.
So we want to talk to you about recent announcement we made in DevBlog regarding CV Rework. I'm sure many of you are very interested in this topic.
Yep.
And just to elaborate and remind you, we announced that CV Rework is almost over. That is approaching the release. That we want to release Rework Carrier gameplay in...
They're releasing in 8.0, but they're balancing it through 8.1, 2, and 3.
Everybody understands that will be next year. So, we had a lot of comments, discussions, feedback from you guys. And Arthur even have a list of your questions.
Oh, it's going to be good.
It's fair and good to comment on your concerns and to explain you better in depth why we made specific decisions, how we're going to handle carriers after rework, and overall clarify the situation for you.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. So I guess let's start with the easiest question. Are we doing this stuff for consoles?
No. So this is something that I really want to comment to get rid of.
I never thought it was for the consoles either.
World of Warcraft PC, along with you guys, our players, is the most valuable thing for many of us and for the studio in general. It's our successful, accomplished game, and from any point of view,
I never thought
it doesn't make sense to endanger the
it was going to be for console gameplay.
A new title. Of course, these guys work with us. They located one floor. I won't say above or or not, but they use our 3D content. They, of course, base their game on our core gameplay. That's correct. And I'm sure that if the rework is released as we plan, and when it's polished and the experience is good, they will use it for the product, of course.
Yeah, interesting. But then again, WarGaming would never admit that it was for the console either, I guess.
We'll use whatever they have.
Yeah, but from any point of view, like from professional business point of view, just from any point of view, it doesn't make sense to make the experience in your main.
They want more players. It was never about console, I guess.
Just to
at least
affect timeline of
that's been cynical if you think of that way.
Timeline. And CVs are not a hard requirement for release. They can live without CVs for some time. It's fine. They have.
That's pretty true. The console doesn't need carrier gameplay immediately.
So it is not done because of consoles. If it's compatible with console, it is a bonus for us, and that's it.
Let's move to the nitty-gritty stuff. So
yes,
what about
please.
Balancing carriers.
Oh,
yeah, we heard a lot of concerns regarding everything that can be balanced, like DPS of anti-air guns, like flooding damage, fire damage, accuracy.
Yeah, how are you going to balance that?
Of course, there are a lot of parameters in our game to tweak and tune, but the problem is that you cannot really...
He's going to talk about how you can't balance on the test server, therefore you have to do full behavior on the live server.
Beta test. They behave differently. Even those who dedicated testers who understand the goals of the test, they cannot emulate the whole environment for us. So the goal of beta test is to provide some general proof of concept, to gather feedback, some pain points.
There's been a lot of feedback. I don't know how much is positive.
And we actually, when I did the last workshop with Danny Volkov, we explained this as well. But it's inevitable.
Well, sorry, what I mean is there's a lot of feedback from the people who took part in the beta test, and there were many positive parts to the feedback that we said, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. But overall, the core concept is still bad. It still needs work. At least that was my feedback. And most people I know. But then again, I guess I'm a biased skew in that I'm a CV main. But the thing is, I'm not a CV RTS main, and this going into this rework, I am someone wanting the action gameplay to be successful, to be good. And the way I see the action gameplay to be good is perhaps not necessarily what other people have said, and they're going ahead, WarGaming that is, with a CV action rework that is lacking. Anyway, let's continue and see what else they say.
That all tweaking of individual ships and the balancing between ships will be done on production.
So there you go.
Unfortunately.
So it's gone into 8.0 and then
some period of unstable metagame probably.
As he says, unstable meta gameplay, but
for like 1 or 2 updates we'll be able to gather all.
You're gonna have 2 months of chaos until it's all balanced out and tweaked.
After that, I think we will be mostly done, and I think it's worth mentioning that for our premium carriers owners, we understand that we will have to balance them as well, and we will offer you a refund option for the whole duration of this rebalancing. So basically, before we close the refund option, you will know that this ship is in final state, and you'll make educated decisions whether to refund it or
oh my god.
like it.
Yeah.
So like we already know that there's rockets and torpedo and dive bombers, and how they try and differentiate them at the moment between the US and the Japanese is the number of planes in the wave, or how big the wave is, or how big the squadron is, or how many rockets there are, or the Japanese getting armor-piercing dive bombers, whereas the Americans don't. They get HE now, and the Japanese can have deep water torps, or at least they did in the previous tests. So how do you make a premium ship unique? Like, how do you finally balance the Graf Zeppelin for release that isn't like massively OP? Because AP bombs are still massively trolly if you're still going to use them. It would be interesting to see how they change it. I mean, there are, like I'd say, a million different ways they can balance stuff. So watch this space, I guess. I just hope they do it properly.
That's awesome. So one of the other things that you guys have listed as one of the pain points of the community is the fact that we've chosen to remove direct control of carrier hulls.
Thank
We've
you.
heard many different comments on that, and it's super dumb too. We really need it for gameplay. So let's break that stuff down.
Okay.
For you guys.
I realize, like, probably what WarGaming is going to say is, before they go, let's see if I can put on my screwing hat and forethought. I'm saying that if this was your hull over here, right, this little ship, you should be able to control a plane, fly it out into the map, and then if you need to control your hull, you can jump back to your hull, you can micro position and control it and use the consumables and that type of stuff, and then once you're finished with your hull micro control, you jump back to your plane. That's what we mean by plane and hull control. Not simultaneously, but the fact is I can go from plane back to hull back to plane. Whereas in the current system, I can go from hull to plane, the plane takes off and it flies, but then if I go back to hull, then I lose full control of that plane, it flies all the way back, lands, and only then can I retake off those planes. I'd have to use other planes. So if you've flown all the way to the other side of the map, and you need to control your ship, for whatever reason, you can't. Or because you would sacrifice that plane attack. Or you can, but then you'd have to take forever to get back out there. And they will probably say that this is an edge case, and that you will only need to do this 5% of the time or less, so therefore it's not worth doing. That is probably what they're going to say.
Is it really needed for gameplay?
Yes!
So first of all, I really noticed that. Maybe some players just didn't participate on beta, or they didn't have time to explore it, but we did not remove direct controls. We removed direct controls simultaneously with controlling squadron. So basically now you are sitting only on one unit, one avatar. You're either controlling the squadron. If you want to switch to carrier, you can control it both with tactical map or with your regular keyboard.
Not really.
But
No, that's not correct. You can control it, but you can't manipulate the speeds. When you go into the tactical map, the global map, and you still have the plane flying, you can't control the carrier. You have to sacrifice the plane and come back. And you can't use the consumables either.
if you control carrier, basically you send your squadron away. So the main issue here is an ability to control the ship and the squadron at the same time. And we had this opportunity in the old gameplay where you typically could control squadron only with mouse, and you could control carrier both plotting course and tactical map or just using your keys. We do think that it's not crucial for current gameplay at core, because in this CV rework, we shifted our focus heavily to squadron control. And we are like leaving RTS type of gameplay where you need to take care of more than one unit at a time, basically. And we're moving to action-packed gameplay.
Yeah, but so I think there's a disconnect here from what Subactavian thinks we're asking for. I am not, to be clear, asking for the ability to simultaneously control my carrier by microing my carrier and mouse controlling or whatever the planes. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the ability to jump back and forth between the two, from carrier to planes, planes back to carrier, and then from carrier back to planes. I can control the carrier, micro the carrier, do what I need to do with the carrier, then go back to the planes that are returning. We just said this like 2-3 minutes ago. That's all I'm after. I think he's getting confused with what the request is.
This actually allows us to make it more balanced.
I mean, it's still action-based, and it's still balanced-ish. You're jumping back and forth.
That also feeds into the immersion argument, right? Because since we're going away from this RTS type gameplay, where anyway you didn't have a lot of immersion of controlling your carriers because you were always in this top-down god.
Oh my goodness. This is a whole hour. I just realized this video.
You to have the immersion in the squadron avatar, or with the squadron avatar, with controlling your planes. That's where we want the immersion to be, with flying through flak and all of that awesome stuff, right? So, but what about torpedo dodging? That was probably the most immersive part of carrier control before.
Yeah, to break it down, let's discuss why do our players want this feature. Like for immersion, like probably it's not a big argument because you still get to see your carrier, you can control a carrier, you see takeoff, landing, and overall in this new
not really.
You spend more time observing some visual content.
You're more flying your planes than anything else. The carrier could just sit in the backline and do nothing. It might as well just be a static airfield.
Carrier, like should position itself, of course. I think that for most of the tasks, for example, plotting some course in the beginning of the battle, whether you want to hide behind an island or be safe and just try to go to map border, autopilot is okay. And we heavily improved it, especially for some cases where, for example, you hit an island and you want to reverse, so autopilot now can reverse in the latest update of this rework.
To be seen if that's
but
effective.
There are still some cases where
what happens if I want to go between the islands at Two Brothers?
Direct control.
Yes.
For example, torpedo dodging, as you told. Well,
or shell dodging.
For now, we believe that if carrier players want to direct the control hull and dodge torpedoes, if the situation is that critical, they have a choice. They can either switch to carrier and forget about squadron for some time, or they can try to defend themselves with squadron, but not both at the same time. I mean, this is kind of reward for those who reach carrier, and this is a choice for carrier player. And we think from point of view of balance and from the point of view of
how is that unbalanced and unfair?
On one unit, on squadron.
You are doing one unit at a time. You're doing carrier than the plane.
That when players actually get to play it on live, meta will change. There will be some combat situations. There will be some scenarios that probably we don't know about yet, or that are not that visible in beta test.
Like, it's really simple. If you're moving along and let's say you get plane detected by the enemy carrier because he can fly very fast and his planes can come and air detect you. Battleships on certain maps and certain spawns will have range to shoot you. And if that's the case, you need to sacrifice your plane wave because you have to get back to carrier control and you need to angle your hull. Doesn't happen every time, but it's rare. There are times when you need to angle your ship or make a turn which involves more micro control rather than autopilot because you want to micro the turn perfectly so that you're angled effectively to escape, right? So that is edge case. Or alternatively, yes, there may be like long range torpedoes coming in at another point of the game that you're like, oh, I need to dodge these torps, right? Or maybe there's a destroyer chasing your ass and you're like, oh, okay, well, I need to wiggle, or I need to kind of evade, or I'm trying to get it so that he has a hard time hitting me if I've got an armor flight deck like on the Hakuria, for example. And then when that's done, I can go back to my plane wave and attack. But is it not too much to ask to have ship hull control and then jump back to my plane wave? Now, the plane wave can either loiter where you left it, or it can return to the carrier as it currently does, but at least allow me to jump back to the plane wave if it hasn't already landed, right?
We will see.
Definitely.
Maybe this feature will be worth developing. Maybe
it is.
like simultaneous control of carrier.
Not simultaneous,
or
but
some
back and
uplink,
forth.
For example, as player suggested, you get to switch to your CV and your squadron just stays there.
Yes, yes, that's the what I want.
Maybe it's worth developing.
Yes, it
We
is.
don't know yet.
Yes, you.
We're not sure about that.
I'm telling you now, it's worth
Then
it.
we need to concentrate on core gameplay first.
It is part of core
Something
gameplay.
spend most of the time controlling squadron. So for now, this is no for release, but consideration for future if it will be really the thing that players need.
One of the other things that players mentioned that they disliked is the concept of automatic consumables.
Oh yeah, don't like
Let's
that.
break that down for
Don't
the
like that.
building. Like,
Sell it to me,
how much that we
Octavian.
believe is going to be in the new squadron controls. It's going to supplement the depth of gameplay, and why we believe that consumable usage for carriers specifically is not really that critical of a thing for players.
I fully agree that automated consumables on CV HAL is at least like very unusual idea. It looks maybe
Yes.
controversial.
Yes.
But we have reasons.
Okay.
So
Before he answers, it's because this goes back to the we don't want to give you hull control and plane control at the same time. Like, we want you to focus on one thing at a time. That's probably where he's going to come from right here. And I sell it to me real hard here. What's going to stop me from using my damage con, my heal, or my plane fighter cap when I want to?
let's assume that. Let's talk about other classes. You manage all consumables on battleships, destroyers, and cruisers manually. And we think it makes sense, because you're playing on that exact unit, the situation around you, you observe it.
Oh, it's going to go down that
you
way.
have awareness of the situation, utilizing the DCP, healing, smoke, support consumables. This makes sense. With carriers, most of the time, people will spend on squadron. And squadron,
This is a new avatar.
yes, it's your avatar, and it has set of consumables. Moreover, each squadron type has like different independent consumable timers, so we manage all of them. And despite all potato jokes we have, like a lot of our players have really hard time keeping attention on the situation around carrier when they control squadron.
Well,
This is a fact. And it's not because they can't manage two things at the same time.
if they have a hard time, it's really simple. I'll make it very simple for you. By default, have your silly automated system active. However, those people who are more skilled or who have, are more capable, give the option to turn automated CV consumables off. Like that. Boom, done. Off. Click. That's it. And then we can decide how we want to do it ourselves. It's like training wheels. We'll guide you through the carrier earlier on, and we'll automate the consumables for you. But then ultimately, you know what? You can turn that off and you can do it yourself. I don't want a system telling me what to do. I don't want the AI autopiloting my ship along. I don't want the AI to tell me when it wants to use the consumables. I will dictate that. Anyway,
As some players suggested. It's just because you're involved with squadron gameplay.
Yes.
Like this is action.
This is immersion.
Yes, this is action gameplay, and somewhere you have your CV how to take care about. So our concept here is to concentrate all management, micromanagement, all decision making, like most of the gameplay on squadron.
They're basically making it as simple as possible. They're trying to keep your focus on one thing, and you just do one thing.
With usage of balance settings for flooding, for fire duration, and consumables cooldown, I think we managed to achieve the effect that like CV HAL kind of takes care about itself. We don't think it's really exploitable or something, because right now with current settings for fire and flooding, basically there is almost zero situations where you want not to, for example, trigger your DCP. Like if you catch fire, well, if you're like catch flooding, usually player just pushes the button, and in this case it's not almost always it's not a real decision, it's just reaction, and we just make this reaction automatic. This is like what how we want to approach this. We hope
So if I attack a carrier once, get a fire
attention
flooding,
to the
force a
balance
damage
settings,
con,
consumables, duration, cooldowns to make it
automatically.
comfortable, and to allow players to concentrate on controlling squadron, performing
No,
attacks,
I
playing the gameplay. That was the whole point of Rework.
I don't know about that.
basically we're automating the stuff that we believe is not really going to be part of the core gameplay anymore of carriers.
What's the point of the
That's
hull then?
fine. But a lot of people have also said that because we're doing that, we're kind of dumbing down carrier gameplay, and we're dumbing down carrier gameplay a lot, or much too much. So, guys, we also want to tell you a bit about what the depth is going to be in the new carrier gameplay. So we will have a lot of different stuff for people to do with their avatar. It's not going to be just point and click as it mostly was in the old RTS system. But
That's that is a gross oversimplification of what carrying the RTS is. Yeah, sure, you were pointing and clicking, but let's be clear here. On the highest levels, the skill ceiling in RTS carrier was astronomical because you are doing plane conservation because it's not unlimited. You're doing site denial, site provision, striking, dot support, team support, bombing protection, bombing escort, and then you've got the whole balance of fighter micro and everything. It's not just point and click. To trivialize it is somewhat insulting.
To manage as well. One of these things will be AA avoidance. So obviously in the new system, the close and mid-range AA aura will just deal damage over time. But
yeah, that's true. But you can
gameplay
dodge the long range, which means you can spot.
The flak bubbles that are spawned.
But
by the
planes are sluggish though, and the maneuverability is difficult.
It's going to be a risk-reward kind of gameplay where you either go full in with your attack and you take the damage through the bubbles, or you make sure you avoid them, but then you might have harder time and aim. Right?
I don't know about that. Scouting is going to be interesting because you don't instant die at long range anymore.
We'll get a bit back because before talking about this gameplay depth, I just want you guys to understand that this rework is massive, and we don't have live data from live servers.
Yeah, I get that.
So
yeah, they need to test more.
We don't want CVs to be simpler or to be dumb compared to other classes.
But they are. They're shallow and repetitive at the moment, dude.
And
as of 8.0, they're shallow and repetitive.
Is to create several features or create some areas in game design where there is depth, skill, player development, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Whether they all will work on live, we cannot be sure. And we know that you guys are very good at finding new tactics. So
yeah, I'm sure we will.
When the CV rework is live, you will find out some more areas for skill development, and we will adjust our concept. But I want just to think about this question: how many games do you need to play on a battleship, for example, to fully comprehend this class? Like starting from just simple firing your guns, target prediction, then managing your consumables, knowing where to trigger, when to trigger DCP or not to trigger, avoiding torpedoes, positioning, angling, and overall strategic planning that is involved in battleship, basically. I think it's far beyond 10 battles or something. It will require a lot of time.
Yeah, but the new carrier is going to be how you bomb and how you effectively attack ships.
But we really, really doubt that everybody...
That's going to take a while for carriers.
...comprehends all depth of gameplay just in 10 battles. And we think that...
and that will take more than 10 battles, though. Knowing how to bomb with your planes.
Talk about right now. You guys will discover a lot of depth and opportunities to master carriers. And it's not just point and click. Of course, old RTS gameplay was point and click, but it contained a strategic depth because you had different units under your control. Now you have one squadron, and Arthur just elaborated on AA, on maneuvering. But we also have one of the main aspects of squadron control, and this is performing an attack. So I think that this is very interesting and rich area of gameplay, which kind of sometimes goes underestimated. When you perform attack, you should not just select targets and click. You can make choice of your speed. You can make choice of maneuver. You have this scalable, dispersion of your torpedoes, and rockets.
Super widespread, or you can narrow it in.
Possibility of plan attack earlier, get better dispersion, but you have to plan more carefully. Or you can launch, for example, attack quicker.
Yeah, but against bots, it was easy to hit them. Real people will dodge quite effectively. Especially single torpedo bomber waves. It's very hard to hit smaller targets.
Not not everybody used this to full extent yet.
Dive bombers are also very trolly to anticipate when to dive and when to drop. Well, you'll learn it eventually,
You
though.
told me that you can do some shenanigans with bombs now when you're attacking.
Yes, you can. Like AP bombs, especially. AP bombs, which we know is very controversial subject right now.
Thank you, because it's not well balanced.
Knowing about how they work
Yeah.
on our current
I
game.
hate being Citadel.
Yes. So basically,
Whoa.
function server-
You hate being Citadel. Well, that's like your own fault. If you can't make a bomb that works against proper target, like are they, what's their designated purpose? Are they large anti-capital ships? Because they work really well against German battleships, obviously, and then other targets, and then cruisers are super vulnerable at 9s and 10s. But that's your balancing wargaming. AP bombs have been in since the Enterprise, and you've not balanced them since, and you made it worse with the Graf Zeppelin AP bombs. If there's anyone to blame, it's yourself. Like, don't go blaming the AP bomb on the rework.
AP bombs are like simplified shells AP shells that hit you.
Makes sense.
90 degrees from above.
Yep.
That's it, basically.
Yeah.
Are you gonna
With
change
this
it?
new gameplay, right now we designed so that the IGN carriers will
Japanese have AP bombs. Yep.
They will be like mandatory. They
Because
will
you
be
can't
optional
not have
because
them.
they're
Tier 4, only AP bombs and fighter rockets.
Later, I think.
Yep.
But the point is that when we have this carefully designed and emulated attack runs with each squadron type, you have actually much more realistic behavior of bombs. So basically, when you initiate the attack run on dive bombers, IGN dive bombers, you have this trajectory when they start diving, then they
Yes.
start exiting the dive, and basically throughout all this trajectory, you can release the bombs. And now it will affect the angle and the fly trajectory of these bombs, and it will affect how you hit your target. For example, if you want to penetrate the deck, you will probably want to release them a bit earlier when just the bombers are diving. But you also can try to recreate some kind of broadside hit, because
You mean
have this
on
view
the
where
lip?
bombers
So if you
exit
release
the
on the
dive,
lip and it
they
flies
can
that way.
release bombs almost like horizontally, which will work differently against different targets. And now AP bombs can ricochet basically, and now angle of impact is not always 90 degrees. They interact with armor now, and you can like play around this.
It's really hard to AP just to
This
dive
will
bomb
be
in general
faster,
though.
and at the same time, of course, with some fine balancing, we believe that
And the reticle isn't very tight, and ships, if you're coming in elliptical and you're diving,
because right now
they just tweak a little bit and then you miss.
And
The planes are so rubber bandy sluggish that to follow the target's very hard.
Target and do target prediction. Now you will have all this gameplay around when to release them, and they will interact with.
This is fine. I love the interaction. Don't get me wrong. But all I'm just trying to say to wargaming here is that the ships, when they wiggle or they turn, planes don't have the maneuverability, especially in lower tiers, to fully accurately drop on the current elliptical patterns of the drop pattern of the bombers. Plus, there's no easy system telling you have to guess the speed of your target so that you know when to approach your dive. Like, some guy can tweak his change and slow down or speed up, and it makes it very hard to accurately hit regardless, let alone trying to do some sort of angle drop. And then when you do hit them, the damage can be very trolly. It can be very little or a lot, but it's mostly very little depending on how you drop. So I appreciate the technical capability of the skill involved of hitting the target, but let's be clear here, there needs to be a reward out of this. And if you just get like a bounce, a ricochet, no damage, whatever, and your entire attack run again and again and again, assuming the planes don't die to AA, you only get 2,000-3,000 damage at this at tier 4, meaningfully is nothing. You've done nothing with your attack or your strike, and therein lies kind of the problem. So
in much more complicated way.
Ship positioning is obviously still going to be very important, and as you mentioned before, you're going to be able to still use the minimap to position your carrier, and it's going to be improved so that you can have a bit more detailed control over that movement of the carrier. But what about the depth of managing all of the squadrons that you now have? Now we have 3 types versus the 2 that we had in the old system. do they have anything special?
No, that's very good. Tell me about
I
this.
think everybody who is interested in the CV rework knows that there are differences because of weaponry, but there is also like the idea of this penalties of losing losing your planes.
Sure, tell me about the
and
penalties.
Rotating the squadron. So as
Yep.
I told you before, each squadron manages the consumables. Like in parallel, each squadron type manages the consumables separately.
Which doesn't make much sense from a logical point of view, but
if you just concentrate on one squadron type, you obviously will lose more plane. It will require you more time to prepare. You will be able to dispatch less fighter squadrons or dispatch them less frequently, and you can find yourself like being crippled in the late game because you won't have enough planes to do like full squadron.
no, that's not technically true.
So
It's
fighter
waiting for the
consumable that
thing
I
to
see on
prep.
one squadron is not the same fighter consumable that they have on
No,
another squadron.
I think that gameplay around fighters is like separate topics, but yes, basically, if you really want, if the situation is like you need it, you can quickly put all three squadron types up in succession and place fighter squadron with each of them, and they will be active for some time. So you can cover like more area, but you'll in this case you're concentrating on support mostly because you won't have time to do proper attack runs.
Right.
And each squadron, of course, suits a different target best, but it's not only like that. It's not like you always should target this ship with this squadron, because with this direct squadron control, it really makes sense sometimes, not always, but it makes sense to target some parts of the ship. For example, if you have IGN torpedo bombers which have like narrow torpedo cone towards the end, you can try to target specifically bow or aft.
For flooding, right?
Because instead of middle of the ship, if you want to more chances of flooding, because there is no.
You have to hit them first. He's making it sound as if it's really easy to hit the ship in a specific area. That's only battleships you can hit right front. I'd be happy if they hit a destroyer at all.
Do that. You can target specific part of the ship with bombs and rockets because they interact with armor. And for example, if you're speaking about HE bombs, you can set fire to specific parts of the ship. With direct control, you can do that. So basically, it's
kind of
aspects of depth and control.
I'm more happy if I just hit the target, let alone a specific part of the target.
Since IJN torpedo bombers will have this narrow spread, it's going to be, like you said, a bit more precise. You can probably use that as map control, right?
Yeah.
What tactics we hope you guys will discover with IGN bombers is that if you're very good with target prediction, you can try to do long shot with them, especially on high tiers. Basically, IGN torpedo bombers will have a good torpedo range. I think it's
So what I've tried these torpedo bombers. Basically what he's saying is that there are torpedoes that are fast and have a very long kind of run path, except their minimum activation is also really, really long as well. So you can't like drop them super close to your target. You can't get like super close and then release like you currently in the current system. You have to drop them from far away, but they will go a long way and they will end up as a hit target. So you could, hypothetically, if you see a target, you don't have like a reticle like with like you know a ship that's got torpedoes, ship torpedoes. It tells you aim here and you will hit the ship if it goes in a straight line. You don't get that as a carrier, so you have to guesstimate how quick he is and where to drop for that. The problem is that your planes get detected at like 8 or 9 kilometers. So if I see torpedo bombers and I'm a ship, torpedoes don't go beyond the detection range of 8 kilometers. So it's like, oh, there's torpedo bombers, and then you come in, you do your drop, and says, I wonder if he's dropping. And it's the same problem all American carriers have from tier 4 right up to tier 9. Single torpedo bomber wave, which means a single torpedo bomber wave is very easy to dodge and turn into. Unless it's like some other threat going onto that ship and you can't pay attention to this drop at that current time, it's very difficult to hit most ships, destroyers, cruisers, and even quite a few battleships, because they can turn. And if you're like dropping with a wave and you're trying to hit with as many torps as possible, you'd be lucky to get like a few, unless he's like not paying attention, especially with a long range one. I found that the American shorter range drop ones are far more reliable to actually hit a target. So sure, zonal denial that they're talking about is good, but does it actually help the team win? Does it actually give you damage? Does it actually sink the enemy? That's to be seen if someone can do it better. So
should be about maybe 8 kilometers on high tiers. They have decent torpedo speed, not 76 knots, but something around 50 probably. And these are good torpedoes. And they have narrow cone, and it's like the narrowest part in the end. So basically, you can try to launch your torpedo volleys with this torpedo bomb.
Might work in competitive quite well though.
Like farthest distance instead of trying to approach target closely. That will save your plane HP because you will be less damaged by AA. And IGN torpedo bombers also, well, we're also speaking about national trades, but I cannot avoid it because IGN torpedo bombers will have good concealment. And if you buff concealment of IGN torpedo bombers, you'll be able to stealth torp sometimes.
Stealth torp sounds interesting. Maybe that works. It needs to be tested.
Really cool. And guys, right now you can also do concealment differently because we've also introduced line of sight for squadrons now.
Yeah.
Really?
Fortunately, by reducing dramatically the number of squadrons in the air simultaneously and by concentrating on squadron gameplay, now they have basically fair visibility and detectability.
Well, flight. Now that's actually good. Flying around the island.
from
That's kind of cool.
To like observation node on the ship, and now it can collide with terrain and small screen. So whenever you have maps with high mountains, you can conceal a squadrons behind it. But with torpedo bombers, it's especially useful because when you do torpedo bombers attack run, they naturally descend. They descend and they fly at very low
that's
altitude
good.
for some time, and you can use a lot of terrain as cover for them while during your attack run because you have this time and basically you can stab a battleship from the
That's
top
cool. No, no.
from some mountain.
What he's talking about right
You
now,
can
that's very
surprise
nice.
Somebody who's hiding inside or behind a smoke.
Fly, you know, if you've got like a long island chain and there's a ship on the other side and you've seen him by someone else,
Line of sight-
stay
line
low,
of
zip
sight
around,
direct
come around and attack him.
through the
That's good.
kinda,
That's very good.
like terrain, but it's not terrain. But I mean smoke cloud really interrupts line of sight. It has some height and some volume, and basically you can
Just like the
try to-
ships.
Yes, yes.
So, are there any other tricks that you can mention?
We think that it's kind of obvious, but now when you have this wing mechanics, where you can launch several attacks from one squadron, and you will want to launch several attacks from one squadron, you can like try to trick your enemy into wrong positioning. So, for example, you can quickly perform first torpedo drop to bait enemy to perform evasive maneuver, and then quickly do another torpedo drop to catch him.
Not that
Or
quick.
if you can do that, you can interact with your team basically, and well, the current carriers can do it as well, but you still can bait the enemy, for example, into showing broadside.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's always been the
And it
case.
can work, and because you have these multiple wings, you can do it in quick succession. And actually, we think that this is a very good place for skill versus skill, because it's you like controlling squadron and your enemy controlling the ship, and it's like game of prediction. What will he do? Is he going to bait me? Do another?
This sounds like more like a clan battle competitive thing though. For random battles, I don't really think it's going to have that much of an impact.
We will witness some
I mean, you can try torp a target to force him to move towards your team. If he's trying to run away and you force him to back going towards your team, that could work.
Yeah. In that sense, yes. And about tips and tricks, I think that it's worth elaborating a bit more on how AA works now. Like we have this machine guns and glorious close range AA. It works mostly the same. We have some area where they apply damage. I think that they apply damage to one plane at a time, like shooting at different planes. But still, it's like it's not under player control, and it's not really under CV player control. But what now is more interactive is long and medium range AA. Basically, you started with it, but I wanted to explain that right now long range and mid range AA kind of captures your vector, your speed, so the movement parameters, and it like shoots with this prediction. So you can try to trick it. Basically, it places all these AA explosions in front of you, and you can play not only with your steering, you can play with throttle, because if you change throttle and you do this maneuvering, you will basically...
It answers the question of how the flak works, whether flak is random or if it sees the planes and it's trying to predictively flak in front of the planes, so you have to manipulate.
No, I mean, it shoots like almost simultaneously, but it captures your movement every few seconds. So you can trick it, because...
How many seconds exactly? They're not going to tell us that number.
You can basically start changing your...
Something like this. I think that's this is half mechanical skill. You just need to. I don't think there's a.
Depends whether or not the planes actually are maneuverable enough to let you do that. Depends whether or not they allow you to not rubber band and turn or manipulate the speed or whatever.
Like what you should do. It's like when you actually rushing a battleship with
a AA ship that fires tons of flak bubbles.
That sometimes you
Can you even dodge any of that?
He's about to shoot Sal, you need to turn quickly, so he misses basically, and so his aim is messed up. And this is kind of the same type of gameplay. Well, if player ignores it, he or she will fly into AA bubbles that will do a lot of damage to the planes. But it's a choice as well. If you want this target and you want to destroy it quickly, you may sacrifice some planes. But if you want to play safe, you can try to trick this AA system.
To what end? Eventually, you still need to go in and drop. Unless you're spotting the target and you trick the AA.
Defensive AA consumable, the lord and savior of our ships.
isn't, but yeah.
It just increases the damage in the respective guns.
Oh, okay.
Well, you can still, like, the only real issue now we have now, we want to make it obvious, more obvious for player
that's been used,
activated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, you have this enhanced A effects, but it's not that obvious. So we're working on some actual tracer color settings to clearly show that this ship has activated.
Yeah, but how do you communicate that to like the player base that they know it's been used?
It increases damage from the AA.
Right.
But we also have this new feature about switching sectors, and it basically replaces the old one with Control plus click, which we have now.
Yeah.
It's pressing the O button,
I'd
I
like
think.
to comment a bit on this decision. We think that basically Control plus click was a bit dumb, if I may say.
Well,
so.
it was very simple. Control click, boom.
You had is just choose
Click the plane. Oh, I want that one to die.
All your A skills and modernizations, and A will do the job.
Then comes into play. Yeah.
It's a choice. It's still a choice. What squadron to target, but it's a very simple choice. And with this sector switching, basically, I think it's more interesting because it involves your ship position, your maneuvers. It's not just choosing target and clicking on it. It's choosing side and maneuvering and making sure that you either keep the targets on that side of the ship, or that you maneuver somehow, or you switch sides. And what it does, it increases the density of these AA explosions.
That's what we were talking about earlier. Density of AA explosions. Which means, is it a complete wall of flak that you can't fly in?
Those players who don't want to play this, they will be like fine. They're not sacrificing all AA efficiency. It's just distributed evenly, and like you can.
So worst case scenario, right? Tier 10s, Worcester long range AA is gonna flak. And if you use the zonal regioning, so let's say fire all guns on the port side, which is the left, right? Then that's more flak. And if you use if there's such a thing as a defensive fire consumable, then there's like a wall of flak. Here comes the balancing part, basically. How much is appropriate? Is that just like a complete lockout? You can't go in here because if you go in there, you're gonna die. And plus, it raises the damage. So presumably the damage of the flak goes up, and then the damage of the mid-range goes up and the short range. So even if you made it past the flak at the long range, how long would your plane survive through the aura damage, which is just an automatic damage over time against your planes? Because you want to buff then your plane health pool, because it's like they're buffing their damage, so you're buffing your health pool, and then how many attacks can you get in during a defensive fire? And you can tell a defensive fire presumably with, as it says, the tracers. So it's an interesting concept. What it doesn't do is mess with the spread. That was always the grief with old defensive fires, is that I don't care about how much damage, sometimes the spike in damage it does. I'm more concerned about that it wastes the entire attack run because it creates a panic effect, so you can never hit anything unless you're being very devious by the edges of the torps. So it's nice that it doesn't do the panic. To be seen how well balanced it is with the AA damage and what the spike is and how much it's like. If a destroyer can still absolutely annihilate your planes, that's kind of bad because destroyers are so much harder to hit now.
Really, to increase the efficiency of your AA, you keep eye on the enemy squadrons. You try to keep them at the side where you have this increased efficiency. And the switching, well, I mean, it's not difficult in terms of interface. It's just click, choose, and that's it. It will take some time though. So we cannot just theoretically switch. You will have some time to make it work, and this what makes I think another place to show this skill versus skill gameplay, try to bait enemy and switching to the wrong side or doing something like this.
Takes a long time to fly around a ship though to bait one side and then attack from the other. If you work in divisions of 2 carrier-wise, then it could work.
We might have other places for skill to be visible, right? We've said before that these carriers that we're working on now are the very basic concept, which includes the basic interaction of dealing damage to other ships, right, by carriers. But in the future, it's possible we'll have more interactions.
I've heard this on the alternate carrier line. It's not here in 8.0 though, and that's the issue. My concern is that you are releasing the carriers, and I understand why they're doing it, because they've already talked about it, but the simple fact is you're releasing carriers to the wider population in 8.0, and everyone's going to try it, and then after like a week they go, that sucks, and I'm going to quit. Or it's not a fully fleshed out system, I'll come back later or another time. So they won't continue to play. So the populations will spike, and then they might drop. And then the risk is that it will drop. People like myself who play RTS will go, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to play this, so they'll stop playing. So then your current existing player base of carriers will go to nothing. And then whoever you want to replace that existing player base with new people, are they going to keep playing it? I mean, I've seen many comments saying, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to this new system, I love it, it's great, I want to play more. Well, that's great, and if the player numbers go up, then that's fantastic, even on 8.0 in the rudimentary system. But my concern is the shallowness, the lack of detail, the removal of carriers means that the player numbers will drop more. Here's us.
Well, I think we can talk about it a bit. It's kind of spoiler, because you mentioned support. So
tell me what these new support carriers will do. Smoke,
skill,
heals,
like tactical skill, mechanical skill, and some strategical skill. We do know that some of you may want to have like really more complicated gameplay.
Yes, please.
Such gameplay probably won't be that popular, but it still can have place in the game.
Okay.
And we have some plans. It's not like huge announcement or not a huge promise, but we do have some plans.
Plans? Does it mean it's not going to happen anytime soon?
Good use of the carriers which are removed from current tech trees.
Yep.
And maybe add some new carriers. We're thinking about some alternative lines of carriers, but not just new ships with some somewhat a bit different settings. We're thinking about some new types of gameplay that may actually evolve. Maybe they will evolve from current CV, reworked CVs, or maybe there's something.
So they don't know basically. Like, we'll wait till we balance it, then we'll figure it out.
And this could be like new carrier branches with new gameplay. And if we see that,
tell me what the gameplay is.
There are players who want and really like feel like playing supportive gameplay. This may be like support carriers that will interact
scouting,
with the team in different ways.
spotting.
Yeah. I think especially for.
Or are we talking like
like
heals or smokes deployment?
Is mostly the role of carriers there anyway. So to
Yep.
sum it up,
You can't spot torpedoes with planes anymore, by the way. Just saying.
Taking away all the complexity of the current system, right? We're just reintroducing it in the new squadron avatar gameplay. And I think the major point about that is that for us, it's good and important to start with not as much complexity as we had in the previous system, but with less, and then build
on it
from there. Once
makes
we've
sense.
introduced it, we've tested it, and we've seen that people are comfortable and kind of getting used to the new system, because it's easier to add to a small system rather than remove a lot of complexity from a big system.
And basically, we will see like real life servers.
There's probably no other way of them going about it, to be honest.
Which will give
it's
us
not ideal,
much more food for thoughts to elaborate on the system.
I know where they're coming from. And from a logic point of view, they really don't have many options, but
about,
still.
Maybe we'll address another question about fighters.
Oh, here we go.
Because fighters now are consumable. And I noticed a lot of
Area
comments
denial.
where players felt also that it's simplifying. It's something.
It is. It's grossly simplifying team support. But they want to make it action damage focused.
Well, I'm not sure where you played MOBA games. But
yes, I did actually.
And but I'm sure you know that this fighter consumable was inspired by some of these mechanics, and it actually had. Well, you don't get to manually strafe and click with your mouse anymore, but this has some tactical meaning. Maybe you care to comment on that as
all right, tell me why the new system isn't terrible.
Similarities to MOBA Wars? Yes, I think that's very, very obvious, right? So yeah, so I think that a lot of people will still kind of be unhappy with the fact that they don't have kind of fighters as a direct damage or air superiority element. But to be fair, guys, that's actually not true in its entirety. You still will have the air superiority element and the gameplay that's associated with it. It's just moved to a slightly different interaction space. So
my question is it better though than the current system? Now they are trying to keep it focused on one thing at a time, which is why they can't do what, you know, you can't jump back and forth between bombers and fighters, or you can't do one or the other. Like the current fighter system was an elaborate dance, which was quite beautiful in how it worked. You could truly appreciate the skill of one play another. Here, you've basically flying at a bomber. The only way to put a fighter on the field is to fly a bomber, believe it or not, to the location and then drop the consumable of the fighters. And then it's a zonal area denial. It's like, as you say, a word system in MOBA. But the thing is, if you're trying to protect a particular person, you can't protect that particular person. You can protect a particular area. So depending on the map, you can drop one in a particular area. That's the kind of the difference here. Is that as intuitive? Is that as interesting? Is that as good? Who knows?
Previously, you had to manually control your fighter squadrons and fly them around and hunt for targets, just like you would with your
hunt for targets, area denial,
now
scout.
To being a like map control element.
Yep. So
which,
area denial or zonal.
Which you just place basically an AA bubble on a specific area of the
yeah.
map. That's also fine. It doesn't mean it's necessarily simpler. It just means that you have to readjust your way of thinking about how to use fighters effectively in the new system. Like, as Phil mentioned before, you can kind of prioritize using your squadrons not for damage, but for placing all of these wards in very specific areas of the map in a specific time of battle, and then prioritize damage in a different time of battle. So there will still be a lot of depth in that system.
Kind of.
And
it's nowhere near the same,
as
no.
we just said, if it turns out that there's really not, then we'll just change it again.
I doubt they'll change it though.
I think that right now it's going to be very interesting for people to figure out how to use the new fighter consumables.
Well, no, he is right in the consumables. Like on certain maps, there are certain choke points, and on certain choke points over a cap or whatever, and depending how big the area denial of that fire bubble is, will dictate. Alright, go for the cap. The destroyer goes for the cap. I fly my bombers over the friendly destroyer. I pop the fire consumable. It then protects that cap. I can then fly away. He's got some sort of escort protection. Now, the issue I want to know is how easy is it for, let's say I am an AA ship on the enemy team, and I see that the allied carrier has dropped a fighter consumable over the cap. Can I get within AA range and flak down that fighter consumable? Because that's one of the current gameplays we have right now. I can put my fighters in the RTS game mode over a cap zone to protect my destroyer, you know, going a cap so he doesn't get spotted by planes and he doesn't get, like, bombed, for example, right? But as soon as an AA ship moves within AA range and it overlaps the AA in that area, that is now AA denial on a zone. And that's like, there's kind of like a balancing act here. It's a very, very big thing in competitive. And then I have to back off. And then that destroyer is now exposed, and I have to tell him, like, you are exposed, I can't protect you, blah, blah, blah. Now, the thing is, if you can drop consumable fighters and they don't suffer from flak, AA, attrition, or anything like that, and they just fly around there for, like, a ward for a period of time, that is bad. To be seen how that works, right?
So, to sum up this part again, like, rework is almost over, but work has just begun.
Basically,
yeah. Rework is something about general core gameplay, and we do have confirmation that it's good, and we'll talk about it a bit later about our beta test results. But we realize that not of all our design decisions will work as intended. Something new will definitely evolve with your help, of course, and we'll work from now on carriers as well.
Yes, a lot of
your help, as long as it matches our ideas.
Even those that were kind of not super happy with the direction it's going, they said we'll play the shit out of it and we'll give all the feedback that we can to make it the
doing that right now.
Action gameplay for carriers that we can, and that's awesome. That's what we want to.
True, but there's no point me playing the crap out of this to give you feedback if the feedback falls on deaf ears. Like, I appreciate the need to simplify things, but ultimately, the CV hull control and the plane control, I'm going to keep nailing on about this, I need to be able to jump back and forth between them. I don't mean simultaneous control, I just mean jumping back and forth. And the automated consumables, if you're going to have it on, fine, default have it on, but at least give me the option to turn it off when I want to. Don't enforce that on me. This is an experienced player in the RTS gameplay telling you, don't do that.
So Arthur, now I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh no.
Because I know that some particular game designers gave you a list with the preliminary, and even not preliminary, basically, with the current concept of national flavors.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, this is going to be interesting. How are they going to balance the Americans, the Japanese, and the Royal Navy?
Yet,
Soon.
But soon we will. I want you to elaborate on IGN versus USN, because it was always a big topic with community, even with current carriers, and I don't expect people like to pay less attention to it in the future. So what are the differences?
Sure.
Why should you play one line or the other line?
So why
Impress
should you
me.
play a line?
Tell me the balancing
It's
idea.
mostly down to your preference. But I'm sorry. But so from what the designers told me is that the main difference will be, as you actually mentioned before, that for the Japanese carriers you'll have this long, relatively long torpedo range for their torpedo bombers, and the narrow torpedo cone tip that will allow you to have some more precision.
Precision but long
Good
range.
torpedo bomber concealment. They will have good speed on torpedo bombers and dive bombers.
It's better for scouting more than anything else.
On their dive bombers. But as a trade-off, their plane HP is going to be not super great, so potentially you will have...
So they give you AP dive bombers but less health?
Whether you want to stay in a longer or shorter...
And then the long-range torp
period
drops.
of time. And the last thing I have here is that their rocket spread is going to be not an ellipse but a circle, which means that first of all you can attack from
any direction,
any angle, and it doesn't really.
It's kind of like the Graf Zeppelin at the moment, and they're going to the circle drop.
Position yourself that critically against the way other ships are moving, and if you're maneuvering, it also does not increase in its size. So.
Yeah, that's not bad, I guess.
It's a bit more.
The elliptical or the drop pattern doesn't balloon out when you're doing that.
And versus that, the US carriers will have high plane HP, and
I'm guessing slower.
They will have faster planes on higher tiers.
Oh, okay. High health, high planes. Well, they have to get closer, I'm guessing.
And the tier 10 planes.
See, the thing about HE bombs, though, right, just before we go into this, is that they are universally good against all targets. Japanese AP bombers, assuming they balance the AP bombs properly, will be effective against battleships. I mean, that's their intended target. And then presumably maybe somewhat effective against like cruisers. But it's very hard to hit or do meaningful damage on an AP bomb. It's like a battleship AP shell on a destroyer, right? So the issue is, but high explosive bombers can damage everything. So, and plus, let's be clear here, you're not reliant on the AP bomb's pure alpha mechanic. The HE bomb, even if you get like a bad drop and you get one hit, you get a fire, well, that's great. Sure, they might damage control power, but at least you're getting that dot element on top of it. So the initial alpha strike of the AP bomb, is because it can citadel, has to be so much higher than the HE one to make it worthwhile. So the American ones get more health, more speed, they get the chance of dot. Well, that means the AP bombs have to be really good at doing like the sudden shot surprise damage, which cheeses off a lot of people when you do that. Like, oh my god, you did like 30, 40k of damage to me, what the hell? Whereas the HE one might do 20k but the chance of fire or something, you know. It's like, how do you balance between those two bomb mechanics?
Do a bit heavier drops. And there's one more thing. Actually, there's two more things. So the interesting thing, which I also found out when I was playing the beta test for carriers, was that the US rocket planes, they have a choice of rockets.
Yes, that's good. Choice of rockets is good.
You can either go cluster rockets, smaller ones, but that basically launch a lot of smaller missiles, and you can hang tiny TIMs off of the wings. So you then have, I think, only 2 missiles. But they deal a lot of damage and they have a high fire chance. So
what he's getting at is basically high penetration, big ass missiles that blap, or saturating the target with multiple missiles on an area. Now that's cool, And I like that. But this brings me to my next topic. Why can I not choose the armament on my planes in battle? These are decisions that must be made in your port. Do you want deep water torpedoes, normal torpedoes? Do you want AP bombs or HE bombs, like in the current RTS system, for example? Or do you want tiny tin rockets or the Havar, multi small ones? These are decisions you have to make in your port. These are not decisions that you have to make in battle, and they should be made in battle. I should say, well, I want fighters with this type of rockets for takeoff. And even if it takes longer to prep, at least I have the choice to do that. It's like swapping between HE and AP on your battleship. I should be able to choose between Havar or Tiny Tims or whatever when I play.
Actually really fun, at least for me, because I like more risk-reward type of gameplay. So I'd like to have 2 missiles, but at least if they hit, they make a big splash. So that was cool for me. And the other thing that's mentioned here is that the torpedo bomber spread kind of starts narrowing down very early in the attack run, which means that you can potentially reach a very accurate spread and have very accurate aim the longer you aim, but it's also more susceptible to maneuvering, so you kind of need to have good planning, and once you start the attack run, you're going to be locked in.
Reticle tightens up from a wide spread to narrow, but it is
very accurate drop.
It's very susceptible to maneuvering as you turn them, in the balloons. So it's fine.
Worst thing to admit here is that when I played beta, I didn't pay much attention to all these things. Although I realized that there are some nuances and differences, but I know it can self-proof, but it still self-proves my.
Isn't that your job though?
You cannot apprehend the whole complexity of it during first battles, because during first battles you're basically finding.
I'm sure he knows
that
now.
On it and trying to hit it, but then you actually get to understand that even with all these nations and squadron types, you have very distinctable features to remember and to use it to your advantage. Basically.
Yeah, it was same for me. I also didn't catch half of the stuff that's there.
So who did then? Who designed this stuff and then made these settings?
Get that.
And for example, I did notice, I think on some stream or some impressions, that a dude was attacking battleships with AP bombs and holding aim until very end. Which
that's gonna throw the bomb the wrong way.
From first glance, but as we discussed, basically, if you hold the aim until very end, you worsen your angle,
but you got an increased chance of actually hitting though.
Yes.
Then they might bounce.
And
if you drop early, you might do more damage, but the bombs will go all over the place and you'll miss. So if I hold the aim, I'm inside the AA longer, so therefore I should be rewarded more. Right? Well, that's my thought.
Talk about beta and about feedback.
Yeah.
Because we saw, unfortunately, that many of you feel that we're pushing this rework despite of opinions, despite of feedback.
This is turning into a long video.
And I think it's time to cover this and cover the beta results. So the general idea was that CV Rework, as we all know, and you guys know, that it was requested by players who had a lot of jokes about Year of the Carrier. We really felt obliged to speed up and to find good prototype and start beta test. And our goal was there was no question whether we should do rework. The question was how and what should we do. I think that first of all we had three beta sessions, 3 beta periods, and we did some adjustments between them based on player feedback. And I think that you have a list here just to remind our players what was changed during beta test.
Sure. So most of the initial balance changes were based on player feedback. Then a lot of the UI settings, including the plane reserves UI, were
that's helpful.
Done,
you have to know how many you've got. Yeah.
Then the camera settings, the addition of attack timer was also one of the things
that's helpful.
Mentioned.
Sure, absolutely.
And basically a lot of the stuff that has
things that should have been in there in the first place, though.
Player squadrons behave and how they react to input controls from players. So
yeah, they can't be laggy and sluggish like they originally were.
How they react to your steering commands, and how they work with terrain and how they avoid terrain as well. So all of those things were basically.
And I think that really nicely leads us to the question: what if Like, what if I don't like the concept? Because all of these things are aimed at improving the concept that we offer to the players, right? But we also have this question whether overall concept, the core game.
I think the game's too big to fail.
We had surveys on each beta period, and I think let's just try to share some of the results of after third.
Please. Am I the 1% niche that didn't like it?
You know, if you're going to be one of those players who anyway doesn't like the concept, then basically you can throw away these papers, and you're probably not going to like it.
That would be nice. That'd be a Christmas present for me.
Maybe you make the leap of faith and try it, and maybe.
But I have been trying it though.
But that being said, of course we asked players and the participants of the beta tests whether they liked it and what kind of stuff they didn't like. So,
well, yeah, to be fair, average, just before he goes into this, there are elements of the rework I do like, but do not take the Fara likes this to be he likes the whole thing. No, there are elements that are actually pretty good and I like, but the core element I don't. So it's depending how they say, oh yeah, people like this. Most people like this, yeah. Most people probably like the plain HP or the AA rework or whatnot. But did they like the core element gameplay of the attacking? Well, let's find out. I really want to know.
And these are worldwide numbers. 32% just basically liked it. And those are testers that played...
generally liked it.
Oh, and for testers that played more than 10 battles in the test, it's actually even higher. It's 38%.
Okay, 30% liked it. 30%, that's the minority though.
There is reverse dependency here. If you didn't like the rework, probably played less battles. But still, it's worth mentioning that, as far as I remember, almost 40% of those who played over 10 battles during tests liked that.
So a minority liked it?
Simply, I like it, and that's it.
Oh, I like it. So what about the other 60% or so?
To be honest, that doesn't sound like a large number because people will say, well, that means that the rest didn't like it. No, that's actually not true.
Okay.
50% of the people who took part also said that, sure, they liked it in general, but there are nuances and stuff that they would like to have changed. And that's fine. That's always going to be the case. Not even with carriers, but in the game in general.
We tried to cover this exact list of what...
How many people took part in the survey, though? Is an inclusive survey.
We discussed directly controlling CV while controlling the squadron. This was on the list. That's true.
Yes, please.
To explain you why we shouldn't.
And you're wrong.
It's not
controlling both. It's going back and forth between them. That's all.
Things. And I think it's worth covering the percentage of those who just disliked it. I think it was around 15% or something.
15% didn't like it.
13. I have a number.
13 something.
13.2%
didn't like it.
Just didn't like it, and
that's probably me saying dislike like multiple times.
So this is kind of to give you guys an idea of how we make decisions. It's not always
so 2-1 in favor, basically.
Yes, as some people have insinuated.
Thing is.
No, but
thing is,
you can see that.
Was there an ulterior motive? Like carriers, people who don't like carriers and don't play it, and sure enough, there's many reasons why carriers need a rework. I'm not saying it doesn't need a rework, and then sure enough, the action system is the way they're going to go. So let's make the action system as good as we can possibly get. But the point is, how many people voted in this survey and basically said, "Oh yeah, I love the rework," and absolutely go down this way, not because they actually like the rework, but because they severely dislike carriers as a class or the current system. It's like anything's better. I don't care. Give it to me. You know, and like so. I'm wondering how many. It's probably not even another small niche there, but it's something to think about.
We have a majority audience, and you kind of need to cater to that audience as well.
And of course, it's worth mentioning that, of course, players with most number of CV battles, I just want to admit it. Of course, they had worse results. The more
because they're used to their own current system.
Tester has, the more he's inclined to like give lower rating. But still, it's not. We gave you average numbers in the beginning. Like
yes, it's basically saying if you play carriers a lot, you disliked it. If you haven't played carriers a lot, you liked it more. It's understandable.
And I think that there was also like some preconception that it's just for noobs. For not experienced players.
No, it's not for noobs. It's supposed to be for everyone.
Know the game, they don't enjoy it. I think that we had dependency on how many battles you have on production, and we broke down the survey results on that as well.
It's not just high skill players that participated, or not just newbies. We basically had people of different skill levels and different amounts of battles spent in the current carrier gameplay.
So they're just trying to say we had a diverse group of people play this. That's all.
Battles on the live servers.
And
Their results were not significantly different. Their responses were not significantly different. There were people who liked it and didn't like it in all of the groups. So that kind of just highlights the overall acceptance level of the carrier rework, but also the challenges that we're going to be facing from now on, just because the challenges will be coming from both the people who are more casual and both from the people who are carrier mains and potentially high skill carrier players. There's going to be different challenges for these groups.
And I think that's, guys, the bottom line.
That's easy.
Your help, we have for beta test. Now we have confidence in current concept, although we don't deny any challenges that we will face after releasing it. We will work closely and very attentively on balancing all the ships and tweaking and fine polishing, but we also will consider some major adjustments should they be necessary, and we will look for new adjustments.
They're basically just saying that.
I can also say that we're very excited to see how.
They're just saying that.
Oh yeah.
And yes,
hey, we're working on it.
Kind of terrifying,
it's here. We're scared. It's out.
Down to the game since
we're gonna try
alpha,
hard, and we're gonna add more stuff.
When we actually abandoned RTS style gameplay for battleships, destroyers, and cruisers, and made them more like action packed. But we decided to go for it because with your help, we think that this concept is good, and we just need to work on it with you on live server.
Yes, and that's what we're going to do. We hope you'll help us.
And don't get me wrong, I'm all for that. But we just want more functionality or options or choice.
And we'll talk more about it later.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So, this has turned into a long video, but basically, in a recap, here's the system. We're going to work on it more. We will add second carrier lines. We'll add more functionality as we go along. We'll balance as we go for 2 patches. You know, there's stuff coming along. It's not finished, but we need to work on the live server, and that's fine. And automated consumables and hull control, we don't think we're going to go down that line because it's too much, or you know, the reasons they give. And my retort to that would be, look, the action system is fine, minus those 2 systems. I don't like the automated consumables. I don't like the fact that I can't jump back and forth the carrier and the planes. And that's it. It's not simultaneous control. It's going back and forth between the 2. That's the key difference here. I think if somebody chooses and wishes to go from the carrier to the planes, because they take off and they fly out, if I want to go back to the carrier, I can do that. And I can control the carrier, but I should then have the option to go back to the planes as they're, for example, returning or loitering, whatever, returning back to my ship. If I stop controlling the planes, they should come back to my ship. I can micro my ship and then go back to the planes. That is something I feel is absolutely mandatory and totally necessary. Also, when it comes to the automated consumables, sure, have automated consumables there if you want, for new players. But ultimately, have a little option in the options that you can tick automated consumables off. And then I can choose when to use it myself by going back to my carrier. Those are 2 minor things that don't have a huge impact on new players as they're playing, but a more experienced player can have these options, and it doesn't necessarily give them a huge power spike advantage. And if a new player doesn't want to go back to the carrier control, you can do that. So nothing really new about the Waterline. We did learn about, at least for myself, about the stealthing of the planes and going behind islands and the detection mechanics and that type of stuff, and where they're going forward. And it's just reinforcing what I already knew. And it was interesting about the statistic numbers at the end. Anyway, if you stuck with this whole 1 hour and 12 minutes, congratulations for coming and watching to the end, into this episode 4 of Waterline. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and be sure to make your voice heard in the upcoming rework, posting in the comments in this video, or perhaps telling WarGaming on the forum or on Discord or on Reddit, and just let them know how you feel, because they do take your feedback on board, and I think with a little bit more encouraged responses, we might get what we're after, which would be great. So anyway, until next time, guys, goodbye.